Okay, tonight's notes is dividing decimals. So we've done add and subtract, we've done multiply, and now we are going to do dividing decimals. So let's take a review of the parts of a division problem. All right, remember, the divisor is the number you're dividing by. The dividend is the number on the inside of the house, like people like to call that, inside of the house, outside of the house. The dividend is inside the division symbol. The quotient is the answer. The remainder is the number that's left. Okay? So, in a division problem that you've been doing up until this point, your answer here would be 5 remainder 1. Well, we're going to move into a little bit more complicated division now. We're going to move into decimals. So instead of having a remainder, you will be dividing to a certain number of decimal places. When we have a decimal inside the division sign and a whole number outside the division sign, we're just going to go ahead and divide like we normally would and take the decimal point, which is here in this problem, and move it straight up. Okay, so the decimal point, if you have a whole number that you're dividing by, your decimal point on the inside will move straight up into the answer. And you're going to divide out and pretend that that decimal is not even there. So in this example, after we're done dividing, we end up with 145 and 84 hundredths. You're going to continue dividing until there is no remainder or you find a repeating pattern. Okay? This one happened to work out perfectly to 0 at the hundredths spot. If this hadn't worked out to 0, we would add another 0 at the end of our dividend and then pull that 0 down to continue dividing as many times as we needed to until there was no remainder or we had a pattern that had started. Okay, so let's look at an example of this. We're going to try one down here. 78 and 4 hundredths divided by 4. I don't have enough room right here, so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this up here. 78 and 4 hundredths divided by 4. Now I have a whole number on the outside. My divisor is a whole number. And my dividend on the inside is a decimal number. So since I have a whole number on the left, and we have to have a whole number on the left in order to divide, I'm just going to take my decimal point on the inside and move it straight up because that's where it's going to be in my answer. So now I can have how many 4s in 7? 1. And subtract that out just like you've been doing all of your school career. Okay, pull down the next number. Okay, and then you're going to have 4 into 38, and that's going to go 9 times. 4 times 9 is 36. So we have a 2 here, and we're going to pull down the 0. That's going to go 5 times perfectly. But we're not done yet. We still have to pull this 4 down. And 4 goes into 4 one time. And then we have no remainder after that. So make sure that everything is filled in up here on the top. Don't stop here if you have another number that needs to be divided out, even if you end up with a 0 there. So our answer then for this one is 19 and 51 hundredths. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and let you do the second example on your own. You need to do this one. Next, we are going to take a look at what happens if there is a number in the divisor. What if this 3 here was 3/10 instead, for example? And when we're looking at that, let's say we have 6 and 625 thousandths divided by 53 hundredths. Okay? The key to dividing with decimals is you have to take the number you're dividing into another number, and it has to be whole. It has to be a whole number. We can't have a decimal out here. It doesn't work that way. Just can't even think about how we would even do that. So in order to make this a whole number, we're going to have to, essentially, we're going to be multiplying by 10 or 100, both of these numbers. This is the hundredths, so we would multiply both numbers times 100. Now one way we can do that, it's kind of a little shortcut. If I want to multiply times 100, there's 2 zeros in 100, so I'm going to move my decimal 2 times to the right. And that will give me an 8 here. And if I do that to this number, I also have to do it to the inside number. I can't just do 1, because 7 and 224 thousandths divided by 8 hundredths is a lot different number than 7 and 224 thousandths divided by 8. If you try it on a calculator, you'll see you get a big difference in your final answer. So we have to make sure that we're moving the decimal point the same number of spots for both numbers. So this ends up being 8 divided into 722 and 4/10. And now we have a problem just like we started out with in our first example, where we have a decimal on the inside number and a whole number on the outside number. And that's what you're trying to get. You're trying to get a whole number out here on the outside number and leave your decimals in the inside number. Okay, so another example. Okay, once you have that done, you can go ahead and divide out, put your decimal number straight, your decimal point straight up, as they did right here, and then go ahead and divide, and you get 90 and 3/10. Okay, so another example would be if I have 4 and 376 thousandths, and I want to divide that into 1,213. Okay, what I can do is I know I have to move this decimal 1, 2, 3 times to the right to get a whole number. So if I move it 1, 2, 3 times to the right to get a whole number here, I have to do the same thing with this number here. First, we have to determine where is the decimal in this number. There's no decimal there yet. It's a whole number. I don't have any decimal numbers, so my decimal is going to go right at the end. Okay? The decimal always goes right after the ones place. So now I can move 1, 2, 3 times to the right and put my new decimal spot. And then what I'm going to do is fill in with zeros here. Okay? So I started out with 4 and 376 thousandths dividing into 1,213. And after I have adjusted my decimal, now I have 4,376 divided into 1,000, actually it's 1,213,000. Okay, big numbers, we're not actually going to divide those, and you won't see anything like that on your homework. But this kind of a problem is a lot more familiar than the ones with the decimals in it. Let's try a couple of these. I'll actually do one with you, and then that leaves you 2 more to do at least, and I'll explain that in a second. So let's look at this one right here. I am not going to do the division for you, but I am going to help you move your decimals. So on this one, I have 1, 2 decimal places. Okay, 2 numbers behind the decimal point. So I've got to move that decimal point so that I have a whole number. To do that, I've got to move that decimal point to the right 1, 2 times. Okay? And if I move it 2 times here, I also have to move it 2 times on the next one. Now, I'm going to completely rewrite the problem. So now I've moved this decimal twice, and I have 2 instead of 2 hundredths. I'm dividing that into 826 and 4/10. Now I'm going to put my decimal, since I have a whole number on the left now, my decimal point can go straight up, and I'm going to divide this out as if the decimal point were not even there. Notice on the next problem, you only have one number behind the decimal spot, so you're only going to be moving your decimal one time for each number. Okay, I want you to also remember that if you end up with this 4 and you have a remainder at the end, you have to add a 0 and pull your 0 down and keep dividing until you're done. I don't think you're going to have any of that kind of thing on these examples that are typed in for you today. We'll talk more about them in class tomorrow. All right, your secret question for today. I want you to divide 1 2/10 into 14 4/10. That's your secret question. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Keep watching the video if you don't understand. Play it back a couple times, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow.